Another day, another story. The story's name is Set Priorities in Life. It is very important to set priorities in life. If one does not do this, one will lose the most valuable asset of one's life, which is called time. If you lose time, understand that you have also lost all your life's earnings. You have lost everything, and sometimes even being in love can push you from the heights of the sky to the depths of the earth. John was a successful businessman who had everything he could ever want in life. He had built his own company from scratch, and he was now one of the richest men in the city. However, despite all his success, John was lonely. He had never found the right person to share his life with, and he longed for someone to love. One day, John met a woman named Sarah. She was beautiful, smart, and funny, and John fell for her instantly. He had never felt this way before, and he knew that she was the one he had been waiting for. John had a close friend named David who had known him since they were in college. David had always been there for John, offering him guidance and support through both his personal and professional life. John and Sarah started dating, and soon they were inseparable. John would cancel business meetings and fly across the country just to be with her. He spent all his time and money on her, and he didn't care. He was in love, and he wanted to show her how much she meant to him. David had noticed the changes in John since he had started dating Sarah. He had seen how John had become so infatuated with her that he was neglecting his business and his responsibilities. David had tried to talk to John about it, but John was too blinded by his love for Sarah to listen. However, John's business started to suffer. He wasn't paying attention to his clients or his employees, and his company began to lose money. He didn't care, though. He was too busy planning his future with Sarah. David would often remind John of the importance of his business, telling him that he had worked too hard to let it slip away. He would urge John to prioritize his work and focus on his responsibilities as a businessman. But John would always shrug off David's advice, insisting that he had everything under control. One day, Sarah told John that she wanted to travel the world with him. She wanted to see all the places they had talked about and make memories together. John was ecstatic, and he agreed to go with her. They traveled the world for months, and John spent all his money on their adventures. He didn't care about his business or his money anymore. He only cared about Sarah. John and Sarah shared many loving moments throughout their time together. They would often sit by the beach at sunset, holding hands and talking about their dreams for the future. John loved watching the way the sun would reflect off Sarah's eyes, making them sparkle like diamonds. One day, John surprised Sarah with a hot air balloon ride over the city. As they soared above the skyline, Sarah snuggled up to John and whispered, "This is the happiest I've ever been." John knew he felt the same way and kissed her on the forehead. Another time, they were walking through a park when it started to rain. Without hesitation, John pulled Sarah under a nearby tree and held her close. They stayed there, sheltered from the rain, wrapped up in each other's arms. John would often surprise Sarah with little gifts, like flowers or chocolates, just to see her smile. And Sarah would reciprocate by cooking John's favorite meals and leaving sweet notes for him to find. They were truly in love, and nothing could keep them apart. Even when they faced challenges, they always worked through them together. They had plans for the future and knew they could conquer anything as long as they were together. It was these loving moments that made John's downfall all the more devastating. Losing the love of his life, along with everything else he had built, was a blow that he could never fully recover. However, one day, Sarah told John that she was leaving him. She had met someone else on their travels, and she was in love with him. John was devastated. He had given up everything for her, and now he was left with nothing. John's mental health began to suffer. As John's mental health began to decline, David became increasingly worried about him. He tried to intervene, but it was too late. John had lost everything, and there was nothing anyone could do to bring him back. He couldn't believe that he had lost everything for someone who didn't love him back. He was institutionalized, and he spent the rest of his life in a mental hospital, lost in his memories of Sarah and the life he had lost. David was heartbroken at the loss of his friend, and he blamed Sarah for John's downfall. He had tried to warn John about the dangers of putting all his eggs in one basket, but John had been too blinded by his love for Sarah to listen. In the end, David could only watch as John's life spiraled out of control. He wished he could have done more to help him, but he knew that John had to make his own choices, no matter how foolish they may have been. The story of John's downfall serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing love over everything else. While it's important to find and nurture meaningful relationships in our lives, we must also balance those relationships with our other responsibilities and priorities. John's obsession with Sarah caused him to neglect his business and his mental health, ultimately leading to his downfall. He became so consumed with his love for Sarah that he lost sight of everything else in his life, and this left him vulnerable and unable to cope when things fell apart. The lesson of John's story is that love alone cannot sustain us. We must also prioritize our well-being and our other responsibilities to lead fulfilling and successful lives. We must find a balance between our relationships and our professional obligations, and we must always be mindful of the choices we make and their potential consequences. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more stories.